So if we start with perceptions, we've sort of answered the question. I was going to ask how many of you work from home permanently, but am I right in thinking that none of you actually works from an office?
That's right for me. Right
yeah,
for me too.
I don't. Well,
Okay.
only from my home office.
Mhm. Okay. So what do friends and family think if you work from home? Should we start with Helen?
I was self-employed, and so therefore worked from home from 2000 to 2006, and then I went back to employment for 3 years, and then I'm doing it again now. So I think they're just well used to it, really.
Okay. And then Erica?
Yeah, I would say that some of my family were actually a little bit sceptical in the beginning as to whether I was actually working at all, and that was a difficult thing to get over as I was building my income. But since over the last 6 months, I actually earn more than my husband now, who works full time, and you could probably say that money talks, and people recognise that I'm actually making quite a lot of money doing it all from home, and that it's absolutely possible. But they were definitely quite sceptical in the beginning. I would say some of them anyway.
Okay, and then Shirley?
Well, since I've been doing it for 20 years, I'm not sure that my family ever think of me working in any other way. But it's interesting because the three of us obviously all work for ourselves. Both my son and my son-in-law are in the IT industry, and both are employees, although, well, my son-in-law is a contractor. My son-in-law commutes into London and loves it, and finds it very difficult to work from home because he has 4 small children and 2 large dogs. And although they've got a family room with a computer, it's very difficult for him to work unless the children are in bed. My son also he works in IT support rather than software, and he worked from home on a very regular basis, Tuesdays and Thursdays for a while when he had some health problems, and his company now look at him as an expert because the initial thing that he encountered as an employee was, well, to what extent was he actually working? And the only way you overcome that is by actually producing good results. And he now gives advice to other people in the company, because obviously it's not enough to just say go home and work. You have to provide the communication and support mechanisms if you've got employees, which I say is a bit different to the Helen and Erica, who were talking about running their own businesses.
So would you say that the perception has changed within the business that your son works for?
Yes, I would.
Seen the employees.
Yeah, and also, I mean, a Telework Association has several hundred members, and I would say that over the last few years, the perception has changed in organisations about working from home. The technology, obviously, makes it much easier nowadays than it was when I started 20 years ago, but also there is a greater recognition of the benefits, and largely because, I mean, there's a whole body of research out there, from the enormous ones like BT to a company that I've worked with in the past, which is 12 employees and they all work from home. There's a huge amount of research about how productive people, the savings that the company makes on all sorts of things, the reduced staff turnover, improved productivity, reduced stress. I sometimes struggle to understand why all companies aren't doing it.
But do you think that perhaps there is still a societal stigma to it? Do you think it is socially accepted, or do you think that there is an assumption perhaps that people don't work quite as hard if they're home working?
Yes, I think there are two things. I think, yes, in society more generally, people who have not come across it before, don't have someone in their family who does it, then the immediate perception is, oh, well, you've got an easy ride there, mate. You know, you don't actually have to work that hard. And of course, managers also who've not had that much experience of managing remote workers before, or also can start off with the perception that, you know, how am I going to know they're working if I can't see them? So yes, I wouldn't say stigma, but I would say a lot of misunderstanding.
And Erica, would you agree with that? Do you think that there is a misunderstanding in society? Have you felt that at all?
No, I think before because some of the things I've done have grown out of a hobby. They quite rightly probably found it difficult to understand how my hobby has gone in and turned into a business. But what I was wondering, as Shirley was talking, is that obviously it's something that's becoming more widely accepted, but is there a lack of opportunities for people to start out working remotely as opposed to going from working on site and then going remote? Because I think it's something I would have liked to have done as a stay-at-home mum, but I find it difficult to find such opportunities, and I think other stay-at-home parents would find it difficult to find those opportunities too.
Yes, I mean, as an organisation, the Telework Association publishes to its members a weekly newsletter, which includes jobs that we found that are offering home-based working. I have to say that probably 2/3 of them are in the IT industry, because obviously that's the industry that understands it most easily. But I would agree that most home working nowadays comes from people who work for an organisation in a more conventional way and then move into home-based working. Word Association, who I mentioned earlier, who have 12 or 14 employees now who all work from home. They're one of the few organisations that I know of who actually recruit people into home-based working. Although having said that, I mean, an example at the other end of the scale is the AA. They have call centre workers who are working from home. In fact, it's a rather long story, but I had a problem with my motorhome recently and had occasion to call out the AA. And both the call centre people that I talked to were actually working at home. I don't think they actually often get asked that question. I asked them because I knew that the AA use a lot of home-based workers. They closed down their Leeds office and moved everybody into home-based working, and the home-based workers turned out to be 36% more productive than the call centre-based ones. Call centres are not very conducive to good communication.
Yeah, I think it is interesting because I think there are a whole swathe of people that would be more than happy to do some sort of work from home, but I think finding the opportunities can be, to work for other companies can be difficult, whereas we promote obviously working for yourself because there are a lack of opportunities.
Yeah, although if the government implements their latest idea, which is that not just parents, but every employee will have the right to request flexible working, although God knows why we need a piece of legislation that says you may ask your boss for this, but because they plan to extend that to all workers rather than carers, then that I think will bring a focus of attention to the fact that there are benefits. I think one of the difficulties is that the legislation on the right to request, which is aimed at parents, gives the impression that home-based working is an employee right and is an employee perk. It doesn't actually focus on the fact that the employer will get higher productivity, lower absenteeism, less stress, and save money on a desk and all those sorts of things. So I think that there's still a mountain to climb in terms of employers understanding that this is not to be bundled in with 2 years maternity rights. This is something that is a benefit not just to the individual but to the organisation.
Thanks, Shirley. And Helen, how do you feel? Do you feel that you've ever come across any sort of negative societal feelings that people perhaps don't think that you work as hard, or?
Well, I've kind of seen it from all different angles, really, because I used to work in I worked as a contractor, worked in IT, and my last employment was in a big IT services company, so I've kind of seen it all ways up, really. Okay. And I think sometimes, I think for starters, the IT services company I used to work for, it was necessity that drove their flexible working. So if you were a more, not exactly senior, but you were a person with experience and a technical skill that they couldn't just hire in any old town, you could work from home because they couldn't get you where they needed you to work. So let's say the person with the skills was on a project in Leeds, and suddenly the next project appeared in Kent. then they're not going to get you to move for 2 years' worth of project work down to Kent, and nor would you. So it was necessity that drove that. But equally, on the other hand, I was interested in what Shirley said about the call centre, because they did actually move their call centre from Coventry to Derby. No, sorry, they moved their offices from Coventry to Derby and outsourced the call centre to India. And it was basically, well, either you move, you drive 100 miles, or 50 to 100 miles to work a day and back, or you find another job. So they were very unsympathetic, I thought. Right. But I do see their point, because that business is very, very competitive, and there are other companies snapping at the heels of the services companies, and unless they're very fast and very efficient and very cost effective, then they're not going to to survive, basically. So there is that.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, what could be more cost effective than closing down your building and having your call centre people working from home? It's a very narrow-minded approach.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there were other factors as to why they moved to India as well, because obviously Indian workers were at the time half the price of UK ones. I mean, that was probably the driving factor. But I think definitely there is that perception that there are. To be honest, I'm really pleased you had an example of the AA of a call centre working, because I've spent quite a lot of time in training in call centres, and the kind of the perception is, well, we've got to have it here. Everyone's got to be together. We've got to see everybody working. They've all got to be on the phones in front of us. And it's great that there are examples. I mean, I always had a gut feeling you could do it differently, but it's great that there are examples where it is working. That's fantastic.
There are write-ups of the AA, which after this call I can try and identify for you if it makes sense for you to have access to those sorts of case studies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of beyond that a bit, because I'm now self-employed, and you can. But again, I think that's out of necessity, because a lot of I've worked with Erica a bit already, and both of us are in the position where a lot of the mums who are starting up businesses from home are really doing it because they don't have any other option. There isn't any. You can get into teleworking if you've got a very valuable recognised skill, like the people I was talking about where I used to work, or you can possibly get into it if you get if your company gets outsourced or your office gets moved. But to actually be a regular worker who suddenly finds themselves in a position where they need a flexible job, is very, very difficult to do that. And I think that's where the work needs to be done to make it possible to apply for flexible jobs when your circumstances change. And it isn't just mums, because my husband's got a long-term health condition, and he's finding it increasingly difficult to hold down a 9-to-5 job. He could work for some periods of the day and some periods of the week quite comfortably and have a much better quality of life. So there are people, health is an issue. People who are approaching retirement, don't want to retire 100% on one particular day. It's an issue. Mums, it's an issue. And it just seems like there's a massive workforce out there that if only employment was more flexible, they could tap into it. But they're just having to go out and be self-employed. And to be honest, I think a lot of them aren't doing particularly well, because it's not an easy transition to make.
Can I ask what type of businesses do mums typically start when they start businesses from home?
Everything really. I mean, some people just go freelance doing what they did before. If your work lends itself to that. Some people take a chance of turning a hobby into a business, which is difficult. It's a massive change in mindset, and a lot of people don't succeed. Some people do, but a lot of people find that very hard to do. Some people retrain. A lot of mums do online businesses, so set up little online shops. Running sort of internet information businesses is getting quite popular, but again, that's not an easy one to do either. I'm sure Erica can tell you about that. That takes quite a lot of planning and thought, and is a lot more difficult than it appears on the surface.